Hello, this is a miniature do-it-yourself project decorating tiny plastic craft skeletons and skulls to look like the sugar candies during the Day of the Dead celebrations for display in small scenes and fall festivals. Suggested supplies and materials are shown and then they're listed below the video. These skeletons are made from a flexible plastic. Some of the heads rotate, arms and legs move. They may have a tan or white base with gray or brown aging paint. They range from 5 3/4 to 6 inches in length. Before I paint the skeletons and skulls, I trim off the excess bits and pieces around the seam edges, maybe from a molding process while they make them. Then I use a craft knife and I try pliers to nip off those pieces, and then I sand down those areas to make it a little bit smoother. So using the craft knife and the craft mat, be really careful. Even though it's a flexible plastic and the little bits do come off pretty easy, it's there's a little bit of hardness to it, and that craft knife can slip, so just be kind of careful when you do that. It seems like the areas that needed the most trimming are on the sides of the face and on the top of the skull sides. Where there were larger sections or pieces that needed to be removed, I use a small pliers. And then I go back to using the craft knife to get off some of the smaller details. And then once I get it to where I get a lot of off in the section, then I'll use some sanding paper, or I'm using an emery board. But you could use the little twig sticks or sanding or abrasion paper. And I just take my time going around and getting those bits around until I can get that skull looking like I need it to look. I'm going to make several of the skeletons and skulls, so I repeat the steps with all of the rest of them using the craft knife and the pliers and then sanding before I paint. The feet and the hand areas will be shown in my skeletons, so I also trim and sand them. You could probably try to put a spray paint primer on the plastic first, but I did not, because it looked like that aging gray and brown paint that they had on there was clinging pretty well to the skeleton base. So I use a white, oyster white, and cream for the base to replicate the sugar exterior effect. For this skeleton, I am using the cream paint as the base. I had already tried the white, the plain white, but it seemed a little bit too bright. So I think for the rest of the skeletons and skulls, I'm going to use the cream and the oyster white. I do paint the entire skeleton, the front, back, sides. I don't go completely inside of the rib cage. I really am only expecting to use the skull, maybe up around the collarbone and the neck, the arms, and from the knee down to the feet, because I'm going to dress the skeletons, so their body will be covered. Earlier, I tried to move the arm at the elbow joint, and it snapped off. And as I'm trying to decide how I'm going to reattach the elbow to the arm, I look at my feet on the skeleton, and all the toes are the same length. They're straight across. So I get my pliers out, and I make an angle cut from the little toe up to the large toe, big toe. So then I can continue painting. I do have to trim those toes and round them out a little bit. I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to reattach that elbow as I paint. I'm going to go ahead and paint the arm. So then I finish up the rest of the skulls and the skeletons as I paint them. I only put one coat of paint on. I thought maybe I would add a couple more layers, but I'm kind of happy with just the one layer. First, I test out markers and paint on a skull. I'm just hoping that the markers will be able to be applied to the acrylic paint base. The markers look like they will adhere well to the paint base. So I start with the eye sockets, and you can use a black or gray or even yellow to fill in the eye sockets, and use a paintbrush or a toothpick, or use your ball stylus to kind of go around and get that circle shape if you like. I found that the ball stylus made it easier for me to go around in the dented areas that are already in the skull. You can use a small one also for the nose, the small end of the ball stylus. It's kind of like an upside down heart on this skeleton. So depending on where you get your little skeleton, they're not all exactly the same. Again, there's a height difference. The collarbones sometimes are a little bit different depending on the manufacturer, I think. But for the most part, the noses are kind of like an upside down heart. And sometimes I just apply a little tiny bit of paint, and then I'll go back over it once it dries and I get a good look at it. And, whoops, I'm going to go add some more right there in the eye. I missed a little spot in the eye socket. So I'm going to use the acrylic paints and markers. For the eye socket area, the acrylic paint seemed to work better. I had more control than I would with the permanent markers, which would kind of get on the outside edges. And in some cases, I did have to remove the excess permanent marker, reapply the base cream coat, let that dry, and then put the paint back on. I am using an ultra fine black permanent marker to trace the mouth shape. I'll go around the outside of the mouth, and then with the top layer of teeth and the bottom layer of teeth, and then I'll take the black permanent marker and go around each individual tooth, which is nice with these because they're already shaped and dented, and you just follow along with that. I squiggle onto a scrap sheet of paper because the marker ink kind of dries out. I think it's from the acrylic paint, and I squiggle it there just to kind of get the ink flowing again. I repeat the process of using paint and marker for the eye sockets, the nose, and the mouth for the rest of the skeletons and skulls. Then I decorate the skeleton and skulls. I use a variety of colors, shapes, and figures. I add paint to the finger and toenails too. And on one skeleton, I add a flower tattoo to the long bone tibia. For comparison, here's a tan skeleton and a gray base skeleton. The tan skeleton's head just whirls around quite a bit. So then I painted them the creamy white. This first one I tried to use like kind of a fuchsia color with some of the bright gold. And then I did another one. I tried to do the marigold all around in oranges, mostly orange. Painted to orange toenails. The other one had fuchsia toenails. Trying to show the colors. This one has the turquoise nose, red flowers, a little heart there in the center, turquoise nails on this one. I am going to change that nose a little bit later on, make it a little smaller. This one is just more of red and light green and red toenails, and that's the one that has the tattoo on the tibia. And then whoops, there goes the head. So they're flexible. The leg joints are flexible in the skeletons. And this one I decided to go with all black, marking scrolls and designs, and then black finger and toenails. Now I'm back to trying to figure out how to fix the arm bone to try to connect them again. I tried using super glue, tacky glue, the combination to connect them with the upper and lower arm bones at the elbow. But that didn't work for me. I did want the arms to move slightly in a different direction than the stiff, straight position that they came in. I decided to try the hand drill to create 2 holes for each arm with the bit. It drilled real easy into the plastic of the skeleton when I made the holes. I'm down about 1/8 of an inch on each of the ends. And I would do this process at the beginning before you start to clothe or costume the skeleton. But by the time I came up with this idea, I had already got through most of the costumes. So I'm showing this now in this part of the video because it would be a lot easier to do it when they don't have the clothes on and you don't get the little specks and the little, the glue drops and things like that might get on your costume. So I'm going to go ahead and show it here. But it was not a hard process. Also, I believe it would work at the knee joint if you wanted to have the legs move as well. I may go back and do that to my skeletons, but right now I just wanted to have those arms to have a little bit of movement. Before I attach the two upper and lower arm pieces, make sure that the thumbs are going to go in the direction that you want them to go before you attach them. To secure the upper and the lower arm, I'm going to use regular sewing thread, doubled up and knotted. Securing the upper arm first with a few stitches, and then going through the back of the lower arm, bringing the needle up through the front. That way you're joining the two pieces, and then do several more stitches going back and forth to the upper and lower arms, and then try to keep the stitches in a vertical at the elbow, going up and down to each other so the thread doesn't go to the side of the bones. And then when you've got a couple stitches in there that you've secured the upper and lower arms, then I make a knot in the center of the two arm pieces, pulling the threads together, and then I knot it, and then I place a dot of glue after I cut the excess thread, and the little arms will have some movement. As I look at this video, I see that this needle has a little curve to it. It didn't originally. It was a normal, very thin needle that was straight, but I use it all the time. It's my favorite needle because it is so thin, and it has bent, but I like it. Well, in this situation, I got this arm on, and I took a little break for lunch, and when I came back, I can't find my needle. Now, I had straightened up before I left, and I'm all over the floor. I've got my flashlight, I'm looking everywhere in my chair, I'm looking up and down my clothes, thinking maybe the needle got caught there. No, when I cleaned up, I accidentally threw it away, so thank goodness I found it. Next time I'll know to check my little trash bin first. Along with the sugar skulls, paper decorations are part of the remembrance festivities. Before I dress the skeletons, I want to make a garland banner using laser cut portions from a blank cardstock kit made by the Paper Orchid Company. This card is about 8 by 5 inches, and it was folded in half, and then it has like little holes you could put a ribbon in if you wanted to. But I just want to use the lacy part because it looks like it would make a good banner. And you can see where I took it from right there. I cut off the little end part so you can get the round part, that straight edge. The corners don't seem to work out, but I'll save them for something else. The banner pieces end up being about 1 inch by 1.25 inches. That's my favorite little clear ruler. I lost that a while back, but I did find him. I cut out 9 pieces, and then I colored them with the permanent marker on the back and the front. I placed it on a plastic protector first. When they were dry, I took some black sewing thread, and I cut a little extra, more than I needed. It was going to be, I don't know, say 15 inches of thread. And then at the very top, not the curvy end, but the flat straight edge, I put a little dab of glue, and then I secured the thread to that. That way it gave it a little bit of flexibility, and there's maybe 1/8 to 1/4 inch in between each of the little paper lacy parts. And then I gather up some of my candles that I made in previous videos to add to the decorations, including the taper, the pillar, and the tea lights. I had some ideas to dress the skeletons. I could use them from purchased dresses from 6-inch dolls. These are princess designs, or some pieces that I made, or more purchases from dollhouse miniature shows. The red dress, purse, and hats came from a show, and then the white lab coat is from a scrapbook package. Here are the costumes that I'm going to use. So I will need to make a couple of items, including a fedora hat. I cut 2 pieces of felt, 1 inch and 2 inch. Then I remove a piece of the smaller one to fit the skeleton skull from the smaller piece. Next, I base stitch around the outside of the larger circle about 1/8 inch from the outer edge. I pull the thread to create a cap-like shape. Then I place the cap inside of the smaller circle, trim the excess off the larger circle of the cap, and then I stitch the cap to the rim piece, and then finish it off with a shiny strip of material for the band along the rim cap intersection on the outside. I also pinched the top of the cap to make a little crease. Next, I want to make a halter top dress and a vest from a very small piece of shiny black and silver polyester blend type fabric. The back of the fabric has a little bit darker, not so shiny portion, and I want to use that to make my vest. And then I want the shiny part to be the dress. So I'm trying to make sure I can get that to fit on this little tiny piece of fabric. I start by measuring the skeletons to make paper patterns from a 2 1/4 by 4 1/2 inch dress for a paper base, and then a 1 3/4 by 2 1/2 inch vest paper base, so 2 rectangle shapes. It took a while to modify, for my goal was just to have as few seams as possible in this pattern. I have written the dimensions that I finally ended up with on the paper patterns in the video. Skeleton shapes do vary though. And I had this pink and white, kind of a tie-dyed polyester blend fabric that seemed similar to the black shiny fabric. So I used a pink marker and I traced the patterns on there. I cut them out and I did some quick seams. For the dress, I put the pieces together to the back, and I hemmed up the back end part way, about 3/4, and then flipped it around to the right side, and then I put the straps up over top of the skeleton. So the straps are going to be a little bit long, just so I could kind of get a measurement of where I would put them. And I'm going to sew them to the shape of the skeleton. But what I wanted to see was the pattern going to work, and it works great. And you get to see the little tattoo on that leg, so I'm kind of happy. Now for the vest, same thing. And I slide it up over the arms because it's flexible with the polyester blend material. And then I do 2 seams on the vest sides under the armpit areas. And those measurements work well. All right, now I'm ready to try it on the shiny fabric. I can save the pink clothes for a future project. In the meantime, I place the paper patterns onto the shiny fabric. I pin and cut out the dress and the vest. To sew the side seams on the vest, I fold the darker front sides together. Then I line up the edges to be sewn from the armpit as shown. I stitch about 1/8 of an inch from the edges. Then I reverse the fabric vest to the right side, the front side, using my fingers to press the seams. I like this fabric because I'm not going to have to put any hems or seams anyplace else other than on the edges there, because the fabric does not appear to fray very much, and that way I can keep the pattern or the fabric a little bit flatter. And with these small scales, sometimes every little hem sticks out. So the only seams that I'm sewing are on the sides for the vest. To make the pants, I cut 2 pieces from a cotton fabric in the dimensions shown, about 3 1/8 by 2 1/4 inch. I stitched the 2 top angled 1 1/4 inch crotch areas as shown. I am using the paper pattern because it shows up easier. Then I fold the legs together as shown. I sew them starting at the crotch area and moving down the pant leg to the foot ends with sewing thread and about 1/8 inch inseams. And then I use dots of glue to stop the fabric from fraying at the ends instead of a hem. When the glue is dry, I turn the fabric inside out. And then I smooth it out with my fingers. Now I'm going to try to see if I can get the skeleton in. I made the pants a little bit big so I could get the feet through, knowing that I am going to sew it also onto the skeleton. Once I can get it up over the legs, past the hands, and up over the hip or the pelvis area, and it slides up. I have a belt showing on there that I put with the shiny fabric, but you don't need a belt because the vest will cover it up. To make the shirt from the scrapbook lab coat, I unglue the sleeves, I remove the dry glue, then I try it on the skeleton. I have to cut it to waist length, and then I remove the sleeves so that I can put it onto the skeleton arms. I tuck in the excess sleeves into the collarbone at the top and I glue it down. Then I add the body part of the shirt to the skeleton. I do change the buttons, go with the smaller seed beads that are 15/0 or aught. Then I glue pinch the sleeves at the wrist. I add a marigold to the vest and a skull seed bead necklace with a hat and a snake armband. To finish the halter dress, I angle cut the strap ends and sew them together. Then I sew the waist to the back. I add dangle wire earrings that I drilled holes on either side of the skull where the ears would be. For the headpiece, I sewed together a 1/4-inch piece of elastic so that it fit the skull. It was about 1.25 inches. Then I glued jewelry findings to the top of it. I glued a tiny jewel piece to a finger for a ring, and then I added some jump rings for bracelets to a wrist. I also used the elastic for a belt in the Fiesta skirt skeleton. To decorate the fuchsia skull skeleton, I placed the white princess dress on it. It's a little bit snug in the back, but it works. I refresh one of the purchased hats with white paint, and then when that's dry, I cover it up with a sparkly hologram glass paint. Then I also paint the roses on top of the hat fuchsia, as well as the dress rose too. When dry, I glue the rose and the feathers back onto the hat. I add a few more paper roses to the top of the hat. I've made those also in a previous wildflower video. And then I add the hat, and she needs something else, so I give her a backpack. For the orange marigold decorated skeleton skull, I add the red purchased dress. To make the headpiece top, I'm going to use a crown from a Christmas ornament top. I have to remove the little metal piece, the spring metal piece. And then I add 2 colors, red and white, of that Chanel ribbon off to the right. Around the bottom edge, I layer it. And after I do that, I just wanted to make the crown a little higher. And after I do that, I add some little gemstones around the edges, and some of them I circle around with gold jump rings. I add a purse that I purchased. It's made out of little seed beads. I'm going to add gold dangly earrings from the little wire loops there on the side, and I place a little gemstone on either side of the little circle. And I glue that inside, then I cut it, and then I shape it to make a little hook. So I shape it using the little jewelry pliers to make it turn around and give me that little hook. And I need to make sure that when I bend it into the hook shape that I can still see that little red gemstone, so I have to make the hook go the right way. I use the hand drill to make little holes where the ears would be so that I can glue the dangly earrings. For the red heart skeleton, I place the Fiesta skirt that I made in a previous video onto the waist, and then I add a blouse I also made, and then I slip on the elastic belt. I trim the blouse with a lacy ribbon into a V shape. I made several seed bead necklaces to see which one would look good. I like the one that matches the dress with the black and the different colors. For the headpiece, I'm using a floral wire that will go around the head, and I'm going to sew some more of that lacy ribbon around it to attach the wire to the ribbon, and then add some small jump rings for a dangly earring effect. On the top of the headpiece, I glue red paper roses. I made a wildflower marigold bouquet to hold and added one of the marigold seed bead necklaces to that. Then I add 5 multicolored jump rings to a finger bone to match the dress and earrings. And then I decide to repaint the white lacy ribbon black on the headband black. This was another fun project. For the final touch, I wanted to double check all my skeletons to make sure I had little marigolds everywhere. I added some tiny marigolds to the top of the hat and to the center of the dress front. For this one, inside of the crown and on top, I placed some tiny marigolds. A Fiesta one has it in the headpiece and in the bouquet. There are tiny marigolds in the headpiece of the halter dress and a large marigold flower on the vest skeleton. I hope you enjoyed my version of mini sugar skeletons and skulls. Thank you so much for watching.